Welcome, everyone. This is the LaRouche Show for Saturday, October 15, 2011. And we have a special lineup today, a special program, because our discussion, which is live today, is taking place, as it happens, on the day of literally hundreds and hundreds of street protests around the world involving hundreds of thousands of people. This arose, it's only been a month after the mid-September Occupy Wall Street upsurge in New York City. But what we're going to do is have a special first-hand report from on the scene in Texas and California from two of our LaRouche Democrat candidates of the slate of six. That would be Kesha Rogers, who's going to be in Austin, Texas, and Summer Shields in the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm glad that we have as co-host today with me Harley Schlanger. Welcome, Harley.
Hi, Marcia. It's good to be back. Okay, Summer and Kesha, you there?
Hey, Harley.
So, Summer, what's going on with Occupy San Francisco?
Well, there's an interesting situation out here where we've got probably, I actually haven't been out there today, but last night there's probably about 200 or so people were gathered around. And what you see, what I was struck by was the fact that you would have, for instance, we had an organizer who passed out leaflets and invited a group of people to come listen to a class on Glass-Steagall and the deeper principles behind it. And sure enough, about 20 people showed up out of this group to come discuss and actually listen to and get orders on what Glass-Steagall is and what it means and why it's important. But the discussion spanned everything from Glass-Steagall as a law to stop Wall Street to why we have to stop the British Empire to stop global genocide and the collapse of human civilization. And what struck me was the high level of discussion that came out of that, which covered everything from, which we brought to the table, the LaRouche Political Action Committee brought to the table, which covered everything from quantum physics to the Platonic solids and boundaries in the universe. And people were ready to have that kind of discussion, which wasn't there out devoid of us. And the interesting thing is that you have some extremely intelligent people who are ready for the leadership that we're providing.
I think it needs to be said, Summer, that from the reports that I've seen from around the country, many of these groups have adopted Glass-Steagall as their leading, I guess they don't call it demand because they don't want to be demanding, but as their leading issue. And, of course, in the last week, there's been an escalation of the fight for Glass-Steagall in Europe, with the former Prime Minister of France, Michel Rocard, endorsing Glass-Steagall in a full-page article in Le Monde, the leading newspaper in France. The debate continues in the Swiss Parliament over Glass-Steagall, largely because the UBS, the bank, which, by the way, people should know this, UBS is the bank that Phil Gramm now works for. Phil Gramm, the guy who repealed Glass-Steagall when he was in the Senate, went to work for UBS, and UBS is now one of the leading criminal institutions in the world, as is proven by the so-called lone trader who lost $2 billion. But the Swiss Parliament is debating it. It's being debated in Denmark, in the Swedish Parliament. It's gotten to the point in Europe where the British had to come up with a completely phony, typically Delphic British operation called ring fencing to try to take the wind out of the sails. But in the United States, as you say, people are interested in this. Is Kesha on now?
Yes, she is.
Kesha, you've been getting the same kind of response on Glass-Steagall in Houston and Austin, I understand.
Yeah, hi, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. I'm out here in Austin now, and we're at City Hall. There's about maybe close to 2,000 people that have marched from City Hall to the capital of Austin, and what you're finding is people are ready for a real solution. We're getting a lot of response to Glass-Steagall. We have a table that's set up here, and as soon as we set up the table, it was swarming with people that are saying, you guys have the guts to tell the truth. There is going to be no solutions as long as Obama remains in office. We have the Obama stash, the Hitler stash, very clearly displayed, and also the solution people are finding, we are the ones that are providing it to them. And so it's been a very polarized response from the participants here. We've had the tables forming with people who want to know what more can we do to get Glass-Steagall through. There's widespread recognition of the fight for Glass-Steagall. But the most important thing, I think, is what Summer brought up, is that we're the ones who's giving people a sense of their human creative identity, of their role in this historic fight in actually shaping history, that this is the fight for Glass-Steagall, and what we're representing is not just a banking policy fight, but it actually represents everything that our nation, in the fight against British imperialism, against the British Empire, going back to the American Revolution, to the fight of Lincoln and the Civil War, to the fight of Franklin Roosevelt when he came into office to defeat the threat of Nazism and the banking rule. This is what the return to Glass-Steagall represents, a shutdown of the British imperial power over the sovereignty of nation-states and actually reviving what is defined as a truly human economy.
And how do you get back the optimism? Because, look, a lot of what we see with Occupy Wall Street is a legitimate anger. People are saying, why are the banks getting bailed out and we're getting nothing? And, of course, this was what you and Summer ran your campaigns on in 2010. But the second point that both of you had was not just we're going to shut down the banks and stop speculation. That's obvious. That has to happen. But both of you presented a different idea, which I think now is beginning to crystallize for people. With Summer, it was the idea of the Four Powers Conference at the time, the idea of the Trans-Pacific. With you, it was NASA, NWAPA, and that once you get Glass-Steagall, you create the circumstances where you can have a credit policy. And I'd like both of you to discuss how you're doing that with your campaigns, because both of you have announced your campaigns for Congress, and I want to congratulate you for doing that and give you an opportunity to organize people listening to this program to understand what the slate represents in terms of this idea of a future. So why don't we start with you, Kesha? You were the victor in 2010 in the Democratic primary in the 22nd District, running on a program of impeach Obama and save NASA. How are you expanding on that this time?
Well, the key thing in which I'm continuing to represent is the leadership absolutely essential for our generation today. The leadership that's actually going to get out there and challenge young people to be a part of a mission to tell the truth. And what you're getting right now is a real response to that type of leadership. One, the fact that the media is going around and saying that Occupy Wall Street, occupation movements don't have any demands, they don't actually know what they want. That's not true. What they want is they want a future. They actually want solutions. The solutions they want to see is what type of future are we going to have the next 2 to 3 generations down the line? And they're not getting that obviously not from Wall Street. They're most definitely not getting it from Obama. They're not getting it from the Democrats and Republicans in Congress that are capitulating. But what they are seeing is they're seeing my campaign here. They're seeing our slate of 6 LaRouche Democrats that are actually providing real solutions. And so when people come up to our table, what we are actually giving them is a sense of what they have to understand as their uniquely human creative identity. And this is defined through a mission for a science driver for the country, for a real space program, returning our nation to the commitment to human space flight once again. And that's just totally exciting these young people, because they know that they just can't be out here, and we just can't be out here against Wall Street, against corporate rule. But the question is, what is the solution we're fighting for? And we're giving them a very clear-cut solution. You get Obama out now. You stop this threat of a coup in the country and a threat for dictatorship, because London, Wall Street, and the British know their system is bankrupt, and you go with a mission for the country. And so, it's interesting because there's a total dichotomy with the young people who are ready to lead the nation. Their response to the solutions being proposed for a trans-Pacific orientation, for a driver in human spaceflight, for high-skilled jobs, for NWAPA, re-implementing the North American Water and Power Lines. They find this is the most exciting thing imaginable. Now, you have on the other side a baby boomer generation that's still committed to allowing for the corporate corruption that they have, ushered in the first place. And so the only way that we're going to get the type of results and, this fight for a real economy once again, and to win the fight for Glass-Steagall and throwing the Wall Street puppet out of the White House, is for more young people to do like I did, to do like, and I still continue to do, and also as Summer is doing and the rest of our congressional slate, and go out and tell the truth and educate the population. And one thing I just want to bring up also is, in that, I think the most beautiful aspect of what we're doing to define and to move this mass strike, and to actually give it a real powerful mission, is we're providing the solutions, but we're providing the solutions from the standpoint of a fight for real creative ideas. And, one of the things that I've found and has shaped every single movement throughout history that has revolution and the political struggle has been the fight of human creative beauty. The ideas defined by beauty in classical music, in classical composition, or in the Negro spirituals. And so one thing that what has been so profound is seeing these young people as we're out here and we have our choruses, and this is what we're doing all over the country with the slate, and this is providing the leadership. We have our choruses out, and you standing here in Austin, and the response we're getting is a real representation of what the mass strike truly represents, and them leaning to us for real leadership. And so we've been singing spirituals like "This Little Light of Mine," "Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Us Around," singing American patriotic songs, and you have swarms of people who are coming up to the table and starting to just sing with us. And this is giving a sense, this is really giving a sense of the empowerment of what this movement can represent as a commitment of our nation to those principles in which this republic, in which our nation was actually founded on. And people know that that's what my campaign and that's what our slate truly defines and represents and brings to the people as the solution.
Let me get to Summer on this, because Summer, one of the things that happened in the last weeks was the shift, the seeming shift in Russia with the reemergence of Putin, who actually never really disappeared, but a Putin-Medvedev team committed to rejecting Wall Street and going with real physical economy. Putin was just in China this last week. They signed a whole series of deals, but more importantly, they made a commitment that they're open for business in physical production and developing resources, science, and technology. And you have a conference coming up this next weekend, which takes up that theme with your campaign in San Francisco as the campaign, as opposed to Nancy Pelosi, who is looking at the polls. You're looking at the next 2 or 3 generations in the Arctic. Give us a sense of what the organizing looks like for that event that you have and what you're doing.
Well, as you probably know, Harley, I announced, and everybody who's listening, I did announce my campaign for the U.S. Congress in Chinatown at a restaurant where we've been having a lot of people who have responded very well to the ideas that Mr. LaRouche is talking about and that my campaign and the six slate are discussing, which is the Pacific orientation and the kind of fight against the British Empire that entails. And you don't really have to describe that and explain all the details to someone who has in China or from China who has some sort of relationship to China, who has seen the breathtaking development that's been taking place there. They have a very recent history of against the British, Sun Yat-sen's fight against British imperialism and against imperialism as a principle. And you have a very real sense of optimism coming from the population there. So the ideas that we put out to the so-called Chinese community here is reverberating greatly. And so we've had different officials the people who are kind of the San Francisco political structure who work from the Chinese community here to help people out who they support running for office. You also don't have to tell a Chinese person from San Francisco why Nancy Pelosi is bad, because anybody who bashes China the way that Pelosi does definitely isn't going to be seen in a favorable light. And so that's weighing in our favor. The real excellent thing has been the tremendous outpouring of support coming from the U.S. population and the average citizen for my having announced the campaign in the Chinese community here in San Francisco, and people who in the U.S. who the idea of a trans-Pacific cooperation is resonating with, and they're very excited by this. And just the whole mass strike process that we're seeing, as Rosa Luxemburg talked about. You had the Tea Party, which came and went. You've got Occupy Wall Street, which is another manifestation of this. No one of these things is a thing in and of itself, but it's part of this principle that is underneath everything that is emerging as people are unsatisfied with what's happening. And you're seeing it emerge with people who want real ideas, that they support the concept of a trans-Pacific orientation, and they've been coming out and showing support for this. So we've been building up, inviting people out to this. We're going to have several engineers, including an engineer, Dr. Chang, who worked on the Three Gorges Dam. We're going to have Hal Cooper is going to come out and do a presentation. He designed the Bering Strait project. He'll be doing a presentation on the Bering Strait engineering tunnel project.
Summer, why don't you give people the information on when and where it's going to be in case anybody from the San Francisco area is listening?
Yes, great. The conference is going to be October 29th, and it's going to be at the Imperial Palace at 818 Washington Street. And it's going to be from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. And the title of the conference is Rescuing Civilization from the Brink, the Great Trans-Pacific Alliance. And you can get more information on the LaRouche PAC website on the right-hand side.
Now, I think the one thing that's interesting is I'm sitting over here in a different part of the world, not exactly in the Trans-Pacific, but this week there was a conference in Ukraine that featured Russian Railways Chairman Yakunin, who's very close to Putin and also has made very favorable comments about LaRouche in the past. And Yakunin announced that there will be an extension of the Trans-Siberian rail system that will go through Ukraine, Slovakia, and to Vienna. And when I heard this, it reminded me of the old industrial triangle proposal of Lyndon and Helga LaRouche, of the connection after the fall of communism of the industrial centers of Europe with Asia. Through this idea of spiral rail connections, high-speed rail, and so on. So when I saw this comment by Yakunin and this agreement that was signed, I immediately thought I may soon be able to hop a train in Vienna. If it were in place now, I could come to your conference, but I don't think it will be in place yet. But this is exactly what we're talking about in terms of the transformation of the world in the future. And Kesha, in the few minutes we have left, I'd like each of you just to say something again about if people are angry at Wall Street, what they should do with their anger, how they should be organizing now. So, Kesha, why don't you start?
Well, I think the key is educating the population, because we have to educate the population around what it means to be human. Secondly, around what solutions they have to fight for. I mean, we're in a moment right now where all of civilization hinges and hangs on the line here, because we're a threat for dictatorship in the United States by Obama's British backers. You have no direction in the current leadership of the baby boomer generation. And as we've been telling these young people here, the survival of the nation and, their generation and the next generations is really going to depend on the 18 to 25 to 35-year-olds and so forth taking up a fight for real ideas, for a mission to restore a truly human creative identity in the population once again. And so that really, and ultimately what it means is that we have to actually fight for a total cultural overhaul of the degenerate culture that we've seen coming out of the baby boomer generation, and that has gone back to really since the assassination, the death of President FDR and the assassination of Bobby and John F. Kennedy, and where you saw cultural degeneration, with the baby boomers in the 68 and so forth. And now you have the two worst presidents and a generation without a future. So what people have to fight for is how are they going to reinstill in the nation the ideas which are going to represent a commitment to a real science driver, putting millions of young people to work in productive jobs, taking Franklin Roosevelt's ideas of a civilian conservation corps, FDR's policy, and Kennedy's policy for a mission for manned spaceflight, and actually having a mission for the future of the nation for the next 25 to 50 plus years down the line. I mean, people have to think long term. It can't just be, what are we going to do about the corporate corruption and so forth now. It's what are we going to commit our nation to for several generations to come, and what are we going to commit mankind to? And I think what Summer just laid out, what you just laid out from the perspective of the Trans-Pacific Alliance, the beauty of what Russia and China are doing right now in their collaboration really signify this great potential that we have to go with. So that's what I would encourage people with.
Summer, let me come back to you. In the first part of the program, Leandra and I talked about Lyndon LaRouche's warning of a Hitler-style coup being imposed on the United States by Obama on behalf of the same people who imposed Hitler on Germany in the 1930s, namely British financial interests, including the Bush family and the Harriman family. I assume we're discussing this with people, not just in the organizing, not just telling them about Glass-Steagall, but that this is a fight to save the nation from this coup. Are we getting any sense back from people that they're aware of the abuses that have taken place since the 9/11 with the Patriot Act and so on? And are people responding to the call to act against this coup?
Yes, I think that what's very clear is ever since Dick Cheney praised Obama, that's been very unsettling for most people who thought that they may have supported Obama, the few that were left. And I did have a chance to look at Leandra's article. The urgency is there. What Kesha's bringing up is very important, because there is the sense now that people can move and fight for some higher principle. And this question of a dictatorship being run by Obama through Dick Cheney is something that is not far removed from people's minds, especially given the fact that he just assassinated 2 American citizens and has been joined buck wild with these drone attacks. What he represents is bad news, and a lot of people have been responding to that in particular. And I think that we have to act within the same kind of urgent time frame that we're discussing here, and Mr. LaRouche has been emphatic about, that it is in game for the British Empire. They're playing for keeps. They're nervous and frantic and they're pushing for a dictatorship inside the U.S. And it's time to really take the higher concepts that people are going to require, drive home a real solution. And part of what I've seen in the recent period, we had this 18-year-old girl who's been coming around, and she told me yesterday she was 8 years old when September 11th happened. And 10 years before that, you had Dick Cheney pushing for a coup inside the United States. So what is very clear, something that Mr. LaRouche has brought up, and we've all discussed here, is that we're losing the generation that fought fascism and knows the British Empire, and we have to move quickly to both educate ourselves and push to make sure that we can take on the fight well into the future and off this planet into space, which I don't think, as was discussed recently, we don't need an oligarchy when we start human space travel. So that's the plus side.